Tested. Okay. Yep.
So, how many of you have seen the issues displayed in these images in the news recently? Okay, so most of you. Well, the news is lying to you. News outlets are actually just businesses who are not presenting a reality to you, they are representing a reality to you. So what does that mean? It means that news and media producers are making very specific choices about the reports they choose to cover versus the reports they choose to ignore, the way they choose to show it to you, so the images they choose, the lighting, the focus, what they choose to say about it, so their language, their tone, their terminology, and how all of that in the end will grab your attention, get them the most clicks, and in the end the most profit. So today I'm going to be talking about 3 things in regards to news and media. First, what's wrong with it. Second, what we can do about it. And third, why this matters. So, what's wrong with it? First of all, news media has drastically changed in the last 10 years. With the pressure to supply 24-hour news cycles, media has become messy. They're not always fact-checking. The reports they put out aren't always backed up by multiple credible sources. And oftentimes the information they're supplying isn't even relevant or important. It's just there to grab your attention and get them the most clicks. Social media. Social media has revolutionized the way we receive our news. The Pew Research Center just came out with a study that says that social media is the main source of news for people under 30. And that can be problematic because false information can spread like wildfire on Twitter and Facebook. For example, how many of you have seen an argument on social media in regards to an issue in the news recently? Yeah, so most of you. So what we have here is a generation of youth who are undoubtedly passionate and curious about the social and political issues of our time period, but who are also horribly misinformed. So what can we do about it? Hopefully my project will help answer that. As of now, I have a group of 26 students from BLS from the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, and they will be undergoing a specific process that encompasses surveys and focus group sessions that will hopefully teach them how to obtain and implement a skill known as news literacy. News literacy is the ability to use critical thinking skills to judge the credibility and reliability of a news report or an information source. So a few things that go along with news literacy would be language. So the idea of loaded language. For example, what are the implications if a news source uses the word anti-abortion rather than pro-life advocacy? Or what are the implications if they say Islamic militant groups rather than terrorists, or illegal immigrants rather than undocumented immigrants? All of these terms have biases and stereotypes and influences that end up influencing the way we receive our information. Along with that is the idea of audience, so us. Who are these outlets trying to target? Who would Fox News' audience be? Who are they trying to target compared to who BuzzFeed is trying to target or who the Huffington Post is trying to target? All of that really influences the decisions that these news producers make. And well, why does this matter? Why should you care about any of what I just said? Well, most of you are 18 or will be turning 18 soon, which means you have the power to vote in the 2016 election. And these elections will impact your life and your future, so you better be well informed before you pick your candidate. Also, most of us will be heading off to college next year, which means we're going to be surrounded by people who think differently than us and come from different places, and we're going to be having discussions inside and outside of the classroom, and we want to make sure that we're conscientious people who are well informed and prepared to be in these discussions. So you and your news. The truth is, we can't change what these news outlets are doing. We can't change the information that they're supplying to us. We can't change the way social media works. We can't change these businesses. But what we can change is the choices we make when we receive this information. We can choose to control what we believe and what we don't. We can choose to better inform ourselves and be better aware of the information that we're receiving. Because I guarantee you that no matter what field of work you go into, being well informed is the key to success. Because in the 21st century, information is power. Thank you.
All right, let's go right to questions that you have for Sophia.
How do we be able to discern reliable information from versus unreliable?
So yeah, that's a good question. That would go into the idea of news literacy, which I didn't go into too depth because there's a lot that goes into that and I knew I wouldn't have time. But so when you see a source, you can often check to see if that source is from another source. So a lot of times you'll see the same exact articles that have just been modified by different outlets. So like New York Times might come out with an article, but it originally came from another outlet, and they'll put that in, like, they'll cite that source. So you can look at the citations to see if it comes from other credible sources. Looking at like the language they use, you can check to see if the source is neutral or possibly biased. And just taking into consideration like the producers, so like who the source is, what their self-interest might be, what audience they're trying to target, the tone that they use when they're talking about an issue, how often they choose to cover a certain piece rather than another. So like the idea of absence and presence, so like what voices are being heard and whose voices are being ignored. Those are all things that go into play with the idea of news literacy and being able to judge if a source is credible or not.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, like, you did a good job of explaining like why we, like the people sitting in this room, should care. But like, what about like when you present in front of everybody
Right,
else?
I'll have to change it up for when I do it for my TED Talk. I think a lot of the points will still be the same. I mean, even though a lot of the students will be younger, eventually they will vote and that will matter. And they are having discussions in their history classrooms and in other classrooms here at BLS. They're having discussions with their friends, you know, on social media or just on the bus going home. And it's important that you show that you are well informed and that you care, because it's not enough to just rant about an issue that you saw in the news if you don't know what you're talking about, or if you're misinformed, and if you're forming opinions based on information that was not credible to begin with. Okay?
So, like, obviously there's a lot of news that actually does go around in the first place. The actual content, like the amount of content that we see, I feel like is more than it has been in the past.
Right.
So, like, if we have less time to process each piece of content, what do you suggest we do about actually analyzing each of them?
Yeah, so that's another big thing, is that now there are so many sources and so many outlets, and you have like big names like CNN and NBC and New York Times and Huffington, but then you have all these obscure little, you know, pages on Facebook or Twitter accounts who are like sometimes political groups, sometimes they're funny. There's like this whole new wave with like satirical news, so like Stephen Colbert and those types of shows. So like that's a lot of information. Those are a lot of sources. And I'm not saying you have to go out there and like look at every single source and look at every single report, but it's about the information that's put in front of you, analyzing that. So like if you follow, you know, a news outlet on your phone and you get the alerts, or if you follow the accounts on Facebook or Twitter, or if you're, you know, watching television news, which people still do nowadays, but it's less common for younger people, then it's about how you're analyzing what's being presented to you. And from that, you'll start to learn like which sources you prefer, which sources you trust more. So if you're realizing, okay, you know, I'm starting to notice that CNN uses this terminology too often and I don't like it, or sometimes, you know, when they're first covering breaking news, they're doing a poor job doing that, and you're noticing these patterns, you'll probably start to form opinions about these outlets and choose what you think is best for you.
All right, let's stop because I want to make sure we get everybody in. Thanks, Sophia. All right, Castle, you're up next. Yeah, and by the way, Mr. Michaelides has been doing his group where he's doing it more like the TED Talks will actually be, where the Q&A is in the middle. And I just decided to keep it controlled, to do it separately. So it's fine, you'll get to practice both ways, no worries.